Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Lopez. I'm a realtor over at Your Castle Real Estate. And today we have Charles Roberts, who's a realtor, investor, and also the president of Your Castle Real Estate, taking some time out of his day to talk to us about the trends going on around Metro Denver. So Charles, welcome.
Hey there.
Hey, and so before we dive into it, because it's a very, very interesting presentation he gives, first point, please ask questions. Anytime you have a question or not sure of something he says, please type it into the Q&A box on the webinar. We do monitor those throughout, and we'll stop and answer those questions. The second thing, just to give everyone a heads up, that we have another webinar scheduled for in about 2 weeks on February 1st. It's something that Charles and I do on a monthly basis. We call it our monthly roundup webinar. And what it is, it's where we get together and we discuss a few deals that happened in the previous month around Denver. We go over the type of property, how we found them, the numbers, and just try to be as transparent as possible about what happened that previous month. So we're doing the next one Thursday, February 1st at 11 a.m. And you can go to denverinvestmentrealestate.com/webinar13 for the registration details. And we'll also be talking about condo conversions on that webinar as well. We went to a very interesting presentation a couple of days ago, and Charles took some copious notes from a research company. So Charles, I'm going to hand the presentation back over to you so we can get things started.
Great. Okay, let's kick this off. So this is Metro Denver real estate trends. Anybody who's known me the last 20 years knows this is like my favorite subject in all the world, is talking about our crazy Denver market and what's going to happen and what happened in the past, or what can we learn from history, and where are we going to go in the future. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through some slides. We take a lot of time at Your Castle trying to take the data and make some sense of it. And we do it partly because it's a great business building thing for us to do, but mostly because we just love this stuff. We just eat it up, and we're also investors. Matter of fact, I put an offer on a property last night for myself, and I'll be finding out today if I got it. So we're still actively investing, actively doing lots of things, and it's really, really important to understand the market. So without further ado, let me jump in and just one more time, ask questions. It's so much more fun to ask questions and ask hard questions and try to learn something from you, so that I'll teach you a little bit, you teach me a little bit, we'll go back and forth. So anytime you have something, we're monitoring it and would love to try to answer your questions. So let's start right here. If anybody saw the Denver Post last week, Denver metro area for sale housing stock at an all-time low, part of nationwide pinch, analysts say. Indeed, they are right. We're at an all-time low. So one of the big takeaways from this presentation should be our record low inventory. Supply and demand, you're going to hear this over and over again the next few minutes. It really is almost as simple as supply and demand. We have very little supply of homes on the market, and we have a lot of demand for homes. So whether you're a first-time home buyer living in an apartment right now trying to buy a place, or you're an investor, you're a fix and flipper, you're a long-term buy and holder, whoever you are, you're seeing the same thing we are. And if you're not, I'd love to hear that. Who, what, when, where, how you're not seeing that, because that is really what is driving our market right now. Anybody, we just had a little technical difficulty here. Can someone let us know if they can hear us? Okay, thank you for the 20 people who just said, yes, we can hear you. Sorry about that, bad on our end. If something goes wrong, again, we're monitoring. It was just weird things, so appreciate. So let me jump back in here. State of the market, RE Colorado data. Let's start with this. Let's look at year to date, which basically is 2016 over 2017. It's looking at all the 2016 data and comparing it to the 2017 data. And here's a weird thing I'm going to tell you. It's not that different. All you hear about in real estate from every real estate agent and every article and every Zillow and every Denver Post and everything is, oh, everything's so different today. Really, what's so different? Under contract listings, we had 2.8% more in 17 versus 16. New listings, we had 2% more. Sold listings, 3% more. That's a pretty static market. Let's just look at the data. The data is pretty static. How about really static? Total days on market. You can't make stuff like this up. It was the same in 2017 versus 2016. Now, what happened was we had more demand than supply. We all know that's what's happening, and that's why prices are continuing to go up. Went up, median sold price went up 8.3%, average sold price went up 8.8%, and amazingly, you're basically getting 100% of the average asking prices on the MLS is what the sales price is. So this is a really good start, and there's some big numbers here. Change in new listings went down a little bit overall, December over December. Change in sold listings, December over December, did go down, and change in median price, December over December, went up, okay? So that's basically what's happening, is the market is tight, but it's not new that it's tight. We're 7, coming on 8 years past our downturn. We're just sort of in the middle, in my opinion, of a very, very long period of time where we have little inventory, we can't satisfy the existing demand, and prices are going up.
And Charles, we have a question here from Tony saying, what are you seeing in the rural areas with 10 to 15 acres?
So Tony, you know, you stumped me early and often. To be honest, I would make it up, and I don't want to make it up. It's just not what I do. So I would say I'd be more than happy to put you in touch with a couple of people who'd be happy to answer that question for you, but I'm not really a rural 10 to 15 acre kind of guy. I can tell you that the land prices have recovered very, very strong. Back during the downturn, when nobody was buying land, even like the KB Homes and the large weren't purchasing it, land was just, you couldn't get a loan on it. It went down in multiples. I mean, some land went down 80%. Land overall has come back. And that's the good news for you landowners. So yeah, you say yes, please. Can he just, do you know how to email us? Just to remind us, make sure that we can.
Just Tony, email Charles at.
My email is croberts, the letter CROBERTS at yourcastle.org. Great. Okay, so once again, what we see are prices are going up, but you know, under contracts, new listings year over year, it's pretty close to what it was in 2016. So now let's look at 40 something years of data here. From 1971, 46 years of data to 2017, and this is homes only, not condos. And what you see are these long periods of prices going up, and then in the 80s, we had some trouble here, high interest rates, things like that, hurt our market, and then we had an inflection point of 1991 was when prices started going up again, and they went up for about 16 straight years. Then it crashed for 2 years, really devastating crash we had, and of course the rest of the country had, and it bottomed out around 2008, and look where we are now. Basically has gone up ever since, and we're hitting record highs every day, every week, every month. Important to note that the average price increase in Denver Metro for single-family homes, about 6.3%, about 6% overall. But one of the things I want to point out with this data is perspective. So you read a news article, you go to Zillow, you talk to an agent, you talk to a friend, all you hear are extremes. It's the worst, it's the best, nothing could ever be worse or better, or market's going crazy, or this or that. It's really important to understand that markets work, at least in real estate, our market tends to work in long cycles. And I'm not saying we can predict the length of a cycle, but we're 7, 8 years past our downturn. The last upturn was 16, 17 years. It's too simple to say because prices are really high right now that they have to go down. And in the last 46 years, there have been exactly 4 of those last 46 years when we didn't actually have an all-time high in price. It's called inflation. Prices tend to go up. So what I'm saying is, the one thing that I feel quite certain is that just because we're at all-time highs does not mean there's going to be a crash. And once again, perspective, I've been hearing since 2012 that the market's going to go down, that it's going to crash again. And after 5, 6 years, that gets a little boring because it hasn't happened yet. And I personally don't believe it's going to happen for a while. Sooner or later, absolutely, the market will begin to correct. But we still have population growth here, and we don't expect that to change anytime soon. We still have very low interest rates, a lot of job growth, under 3% unemployment. We still have more demand than supply, and that's the takeaway, is that as long as we have that, we do expect to see continued price growth.
So Tony asked, Charles, do you think that legalized marijuana and people growing it in residential homes will affect market values?
You know, it's a great question. It's something we've been wrestling with for a long time since we had legalized marijuana. I think there is some reason to believe that whatever it was 4 years ago, or 4 or 5, something like that, when we began legalizing marijuana, that it certainly contributed to the growth of our sector. the growth, I mean, these stereotypical young males who, have baggy pants and are out snowboarding and, maybe smoking pot. Yeah, I actually do think. The problem is we have no data. Like, there is no checkbox when you cross the border from Kansas to Colorado that I'm coming here because I like to smoke dope. We don't have it. So those that make statements like that's what's going on, they don't know what they're talking about. They just know their neighborhood or their business or something. All in all, I do think that there has been some influx and some growth in population and in price rise. Now that other states, though, Massachusetts, California, and others now have legalization, will people be drawn out of Colorado? Maybe. I would say that's probably one out of maybe 100 or 200 variables that if you're a PhD student and you have 18 hours a day to study this stuff, maybe you can actually get some data out of it. My counsel, though, is that is just one of many, many inputs to our market. I don't think it's the strongest, and it's frankly not something I particularly follow. But great question. Thank you for that.
And Matt's asked, do you have the slide available showing year-over-year appreciation rate instead of dollar value? The graph starts to get skewed as the prices go up, even though appreciation rate may be closer to the median.
Yeah, that's a great question. And Matt, I got your voicemail. I'll get back to you. Not in this presentation. I'm trying to think. That's certainly data that we can have. And, you should actually, let's follow up and talk about that, because I'm not sure, I don't normally talk about that, but I'm closing my eyes thinking that is an interesting way of doing it. So what I can tell you, in the last year, it was 8 or 9%, and that's what it's been for this long period of time. But the answer is no, I actually don't have that in this presentation, but I like the way you're thinking. Let's talk more about it. I'll get back to you later today, by the way. Okay, so moving down, want to talk also about Denver condos and townhomes, and mostly just so that you see that it's pretty similar. So this right here was single-family homes, and this is condos and townhomes. They go up, they go down, they go up, they go down, and they go up and down in roughly the same periods of time and roughly the same rate. So what we have seen in the end, if you remember from the previous slide, is the average single-family home price went up 6.3% in this period of time. It was a little bit less for townhomes and condos, but not that much. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think there is a myth that, for example, condos and townhomes are bad investments or you shouldn't buy them. Well, I look at the data and I question that, and I've been asking for years. Someone kind of tell me what that means. Without question, there were some complexes that got crushed, but there were also some neighborhoods that got crushed. So for every complex in, Denver Southeast, I give you a Denver Southwest single-family neighborhood or an Aurora North neighborhood. It's just too simplistic to say that condos and townhomes, for example, go up in price more, go down in price more, move faster. All you do is literally print out both of these slides and just put one on top of the other, literally, physically, and look through the sun with them, and you'll see they're pretty close. So it's important to understand that perspective as well. Okay, any more questions, just let me know. So this right here is a slide that I love to talk about, and those who've been to classes have seen this before, but we update it constantly. And why? Because it's that picture's worth 1,000 words kind of slide. Let me tell you what's going on here. This is measuring the inventory of homes on the market. So this is the active listings in the dark purple, I guess what that is, versus the sold properties every month. So right here, that's January of 08, that's October of 09. And what you see is really critical. You see what a buyer's market looks like. When there are 25,000 properties on the market and you sell 4,000 properties one month, that's a buyer's market. And then what you see is the market change over time. And maybe most importantly, what you see is that it takes a while for the market to change over time. There are examples of market changing radically in a short period of time, but there aren't that many. And Denver is not one of those where that's happened recently. This took from 08 to say 11 or 12. There was about 4 years of a gradual reduction in the listings. We got to 12 and what we saw was, oh yeah, the market's definitely changing now. And it just makes sense. Suddenly there's no supply. And while a lot of us thought this would just be a couple of years and then the supply would go back up, that's not what's happened. And this is the definition of our market. This is called a seller's market. And right here, we've updated up to October 17. We haven't finished the final slide, the final quarter, but I've actually seen the data. Boom, it comes right down again, and they're just about touching. Why? Because we have record low inventory. So my best guess from this slide and many others is that I don't see this changing for a while. I really, really don't. It will change someday. Is it a year away? Is it 5 years away? Is it 10 years? I'm not telling because I don't know. But I think it's going to be at some point, it will be sort of gradual like this over a period of time. And someday our market will slow down and we'll have more inventory. But there's just zero sign of it happening right now. I remember, teaching this 2 or 3 years ago. I'd be like right here and someone would say, oh, look, it's totally spreading out. Wow, everything must be changing. And then 2, 3 years later, that's not what's happening at all. Great. Okay, let's keep on going. So it's an unbelievably tight market. It sure is. And let me give you some additional showing trends. So right here, what we have is the average number of showings per active listing per month over different periods of time. Okay? So there's a lot going on here. So let me walk through it kind of slowly. This right here is 2010. And what you see is January, February, March, every month, what we have is the average number of showings per active listing per month. So let's say you've got a little town that has 10 listings, and let's say there's a total of 100 showings for all the listings in a month. That would be a 10, okay? And 10 is meaningless. 10 doesn't mean anything except it's more than 9 and less than 11. And that's where we came up with this. We just sort of, came up with this. Maybe there's an interesting correlation there. Well, there was, because in 2012, we saw this big jump from about 6 to about 12. And we literally started staffing up at your castle. And we said, okay, yeah, the market, something's happening here. And it did happen. It all kind of works together. So in 2012, there was something of a breakout year where you had more showings per listing. And then let's see, 2014, we said, oh my God, can you believe we hit almost 20 showings per listing? That was like 3 times what it was just a few years before. And the market was so on fire, but it's got to slow down sooner or later. Well, it didn't. 2015, we couldn't believe it. We hit 25, 24, 25 here. And then 2016, we had this crazy moment here, and I promise you, we checked this 5 times. I told Jeremy Conti, don't make me teach this because I can't explain this, but we actually peaked here, and then we came back. And now let's talk about 2017. This is the most recent data, and this is December right here. Here is where we are. You want to know why there's no inventory? You want to know why the market is still strong? We are in record high showings per active listing per month. A year ago, I wouldn't have guessed it would be record high again. That's why I don't guess anymore, because I'm wrong so much. So this is what you're looking at. This right here is an incredibly strong seller's market. This is a strong buyer's market. We're here, and all I can say is that I hope some inventory comes online to begin to satisfy the demand for properties, because at the moment, we're not seeing it. The higher this line, the stronger the market is. The fewer listings there are, the more people looking per listing, the more demand, the more we expect prices to continue going up. Okay, so the question that I get very often at this point is, well, prices have gone up, but what about wages? Have wages gone up and kept up? And the answer is no. And then the follow-up was then there has to be a downturn because people can't afford these prices. And I very, very much understand that mentality. But I want to address it because it's a little more complicated than that. And it's one of the things that we took a deep dive into to really begin to understand the market. So let me start by asking you this. Ask yourself this question. If you were in a class, say, or someone asked you a question, say 4 years ago, and they said, hey, Chris, if the market goes up, if prices go up 40%, do you think people will be able to afford homes in 4 years if it goes up 40%? 100% of us, not you, I'm including myself, would have said, well, no way. Are you kidding? If prices go up 40%, it'll be devastation. It'll be blood in the streets. Of course, people won't be able to afford that. And we were wrong. Every single one of us would have been wrong 4 years ago. if we had answered that, because you know what? Prices did go up 40%. And what do we know? There is more demand than supply. Now, it's less affordable, sure, but people want properties and they're still buying them. So what I want to do is explain to the best of my ability why that is. Like, what's going on? We would have thought if prices went up 40%, nobody could afford them, but that actually is not what happened. And then to project that in the future. So here's the problem. The problem is when you read an article, when you read the Denver Business Journal or read Trulia, everybody says the same thing, that home prices are outpacing income and that can't last forever. And you know what? They're absolutely right. Of course they can't last forever. But the headline has to be something sexy, something like, you know, devastation about to happen or something like that. The reality is much different, and here's the reality as we see it. And really absorbs this because we put a lot of time into this, trying to figure it out. So if there's any loan officers out there, if you understand lending, the debt to income ratio of about 40 to 50% sounds like kind of a magic number. That's what lenders want to lend at. Let me tell you how we got here. What we did is we compared the average Denver per capita income, average home price in Denver, and the average annual mortgage rate to find the average debt to income in our market. And we did this over time. And here's what we found. In the 70s, it was in the 45 to 50%, which is a reasonable debt to income ratio. Then what happened here? Look at that. Can you believe what happened here? Mortgage interest rates spiked and homes became completely unaffordable. That was the period of time of wraps and seller carries, and the market tried to figure it out, but truly the number of home sales went down because interest rates spiked, because the debt to income, the payment you had to make to buy a house, was completely unaffordable. This is unaffordable. Over time, interest rates went down, and we had this long period of time here, about 50%, where it was relatively affordable. Okay, now I'm going to get to the point. Right here, the market crashes, and we have these low points. And right here was a low point and another low point, right about that 2012, and that should sound familiar because all these slides, when you look at them closely enough, interrelate. The point of the story is, yes, we are much less affordable today than we were in 2012. But that only tells a quarter of the story. The rest of the story is actually we're about at average affordability over the last 46 years. That is why people are still buying homes. So when someone says homes are unaffordable, the question is, well, what does that mean? Because there's still people affording homes. What it means is it's less affordable than it is compared to the period of time when it was the most affordable time to buy property in Denver history, when the prices crashed. So of course it's less affordable now than it was, but this was the most affordable period of time ever in our recorded history, going back to 1971. And that's the important thing. So if you're, for example, an agent, you'll hear this all the time. Oh, Bob, you know, I don't want to buy anything. You know, the market's crazy. You know, it's like unaffordable. I heard something that the market's going to go down. People can't afford it. Try bringing some data into the conversation. Try having a conversation with people. Try going out to lunch or coffee. Look a little bit at these slides. Talk to me if I can help you. It is so important to understand the big picture. And if you're an investor, if you're looking to buy for yourself, if you're a buyer, whatever you are, I'm glad you're taking the time. I appreciate you're taking the time because you really stand out from a lot of people. Because, you know, this isn't sort of fluffy stuff. Like, you actually kind of have to think. I talk fast. I move my mouse around a lot. But there's so much value to understand that we are about where we should be. Now, if this goes up, well, if prices keep going up, if wages do not catch up, then absolutely we'll get to a point without question where homes will be unaffordable. That would be this type of area. And let's just wait and see because, you know, again, I'm trying to predict the future. If this continues to go up in a few years, I would absolutely be the first to say that homes will start to become unaffordable. But understanding this perspective is absolutely critical. And hopefully I explained it okay. And as usual, just chime in. We get tons of people on. Love to get your comments. Love to get your questions. If there's anything that I didn't make clear on the last couple of slides, now's the time. Type it in. Let me know. We're monitoring it, and we'd be happy to check it out.
So here's a couple questions. So when it talks about the debt to income ratio, is that just the housing debt, or is that the total person's debt that includes credit card, auto, student loans, whatever type of debt?
So this would be housing debt and other debt that we could measure. So if you're a loan officer, it's there are actually two different types of debts that you can do, and depending upon the level you go, this right here is the housing. So for this one right here, it's the average home price is what we were figuring out. And mostly what we wanted to do is compare these high points with these low points to see the patterns and to see that you have this 20-year stretch when it was actually quite consistent. Yeah, but in this particular one, this is the average home price is what's ruling this. That would be. Yep.
And another question here, a few slides ago with the supply and demand, right there, what is a balanced market?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, I think it's like right in here, maybe 15, 16, 17,000. There's no perfect answer to that because data, the more you understand and have familiarity with data, the less of a science it is. So we'll have periods of time in Denver where we have 16,000 properties on the market that looks like it should be balanced, and yet, you know, days on market are like 30 or 40 instead of the 90. The world works in mysterious ways, but the best thing I can say is it's something between 5 or 6,000 and 25,000. So you'll hear numbers like 15, 16, 17,000. But that actually brings up another really good point. One of the actual changes that have happened, not in Denver, but the whole country, I should say, not in Denver only, but is a national dynamic, is that people are simply moving less frequently. So say 10 years ago, the market would have said people move about every 7 years, and therefore you needed a higher inventory to satisfy that increased demand. Now it's closer to 9 or 10 years. There is no question. I mean, the data is in nationally that people are moving less frequently. And one could say, well, it's because, baby boomers are fixing up their kitchens and, prices are too expensive, so they don't want to move. And one could say it's millennials. They're not married. They're living in their parents' basement. They have huge student loans. There's legions of reasons why people say that people are moving less frequently. The fact is they are moving less frequently, which means we actually need less supply to actually balance it out. So whereas say 5 years ago, I might have said 18,000, honestly, I'm literally saying a little less balanced.
But are people moving less because there's less inventory and they don't deal with it, or is it because other reasons? I mean,
yeah, right.
Or, I mean, can anyone figure that out?
No, okay. Really nobody can. And anybody who pretends, well, they're looking at one piece of data, one data point, and they're forgetting about the 7,000 other data points because it's pretty complicated. But that would be one piece of data. Millennials are, you just can't stop hearing about millennials. Okay, let's talk about that one. Millennials, they want more freedom. They don't want to be tied down. They want a different product. Lots of them want nicer places they can get. They have high student debt. That is absolutely one data point for why there is less, but it gets more complicated the more you go into it. All I can say at the highest level is that people, without question, are moving less frequently than they did a half a generation and certainly a generation ago.
Okay.
Great questions. Keep them coming. Okay, so speaking of home ownership rates, this is a great slide here from the US Census Bureau. What this is talking about is the home ownership trend, the percentage of Americans who live in homes they own versus rent. So back in 1965, when they first started actually amassing this data, 62.9% of Americans lived in homes they owned. And we went through a period of time here where people really thought it made a lot of sense that we should encourage home ownership. And this surprises everybody. It was actually the Nixon administration that began putting rules in lending and government to absolutely encourage home ownership. And as you can see, it really had an effect. The market had an effect, but so did the government. Truly, it was a chicken in every pot. A better America is an America where people own homes. That is exactly what people have thought for a long period of time. So it went up for a while, and then you're probably thinking, why'd it go down? Well, we talked about it. Because interest rates went up. And that's exactly what happened. getting a home when you have a 16% interest rate, it's a bit of a challenge. And it literally knocked down the number of people that could own a home. And by the way, every percentage point equates to about 1.2 million people. So if it goes from 65 to 63, that's 2 times 1.2 million. That's 2.5 million people who don't own a home. We stayed down here during the 80s, and then, as you well know, we had this cyclone in the lending world. You had a government that was encouraging home ownership, you had a business world, you had lending practices, and ultimately you had this huge demand for loan churn that got so many Americans to buy a home. In 2004, we hit a peak of 69.2%, and everybody thought that was a great thing. Who could possibly think that people living the American dream and owning their own home could be a bad thing? Well, there was probably some, PhD from Stanford or something who maybe thought there's a problem here. And there was a problem because it was unsustainable. And this is the definition of a bell curve. It goes up at this rate, it went down at exactly the same rate. And this is the crash. And this is what happened when people lost their homes, couldn't buy homes, and started renting again. And incredibly, in 2016, I kid you not, we bottomed out at 62.9%. 1965, it was 62.9%. 2016, it was 62.9%. It's a little bit higher right now. And what's really interesting, and don't ask me why, Denver's actually below 60%. Denver's at about 59%.
Wait, so this is national?
This is national, yep.
Okay.
Percent of home ownership, U.S. Census, it doesn't say national, but it is. This is Americans, this is national. Denver's actually a few points below. So one asks themselves, if someone's winning, someone's losing. That's just the way it is. If sellers are happy, buyers aren't. If buyers are happy, sellers aren't. If homeowners aren't happy, who's happy? Well, landlords. So all of you who are landlords or prospective landlords or investors or agents working with investors and on, this was a very difficult time to be a landlord. In Denver, and I was one, I had 29 units when we had 13% vacancy. Why did we have huge vacancy? Because everybody could buy a house, didn't need to live in a rental. The exact opposite dynamic has happened now, and this is why we've had 1, 2, 2.5% vacancy rates for the last bunch of years, because people aren't living in homes. And that's one of the connections that I want to make when I talk about these slides, is that every slide, you can ask me a slide and just like say, Charles, how does slide 6 compare to slide 2? And I'll come up with an answer, because it's one market and everything affects everything else. And this right here means that fewer people are living in their homes and people don't tend to leave Denver. That means they rent. And that's why there is not a unhappy landlord within a 100-mile radius of me right now. These are good times. If you have any questions, knock them out. Do we have any questions, anything you want to talk about?
Well, so far, I know this is, newer data for this year. Has anything surprised you at the data that's come out? Like, oh wow, I'm just surprised by that, or are you just so kind of not emotional about the data now?
I think the nerd would be the inerd, not a nerd. Inerd, I'm just like, nothing can shock me anymore. I honestly, I suppose that record low inventory again is a little shocking, but you really do get kind of thick. It's like, okay, yeah, whatever, everybody who said in the summer, tell me if this sounds familiar, if you're listening to this, in the summer, when inventory is building up, and you know what, it's not like it was a year ago. Yeah, I think everything's changing. I must have heard that 50 times from people I like, from smart people, and I just kind of semi-politely nod. I'm like, all right, well, maybe you're right. I don't think you're right. And here we are, record low inventory again. So I guess I'm not shocked, because this is the real estate market. And this is why I become obsessed with the real estate market, because it's something constantly new and constantly interesting. It's the best way I can probably answer that question. So moving on, I know we actually have a lot of investors on, and again, thank you for joining us. This is a lot of fun. So let's look at vacancy rates by quarter versus median rent. What we took is we took Apartment Association of Metro Denver data, and that is the Bible. It is thick. It's like 3/4 of an inch thick. They come up with this this data set, this like handbook, quarterly on all of this data. And then what we do is we interpret the data, and it's pretty easy to understand what's going on. Here's the 80s. You have high vacancy rate, all of a sudden rents don't go up. And we talked earlier about perspective, historical perspective. This is a good example. People who don't understand, let's just say the Denver real estate market, they honestly think that something is going to change next week or next month. And it takes maybe a while, maybe 20 years is what I've been doing this, to understand things just don't change that fast. Everybody wants to think they change, and there is a coterie, there is a media coterie of people who are paid to sell newspapers and blogs and advice, and they have to talk about constant change. Otherwise, they can't make a living. Look at this. 10 years of flat rents. Vacancy rates come down. 11 or 12 years of explosive rent growth. Vacancy rates skyrocket. Holy Toledo, you got about 12 years of flat rents. And by the way, I bought my first investment property here, so I had a couple of good years, and then I had 12 flipping years of literally rents that didn't even keep up with inflation.
What were you thinking at the time?
This sucks.
Because you kind of knew in the past, you knew you had this great run up 10 years before. I'm just curious, do you even remember?
I read Bill Bronchick's book. He was a great guy. He's like, buy rentals. I'm like, great. And then, in the 11th or 12th year, I'm like, okay, seriously, my rent is still like $775 a month. I mean, it sucked. I'm not supposed to swear or anything, but honest to God, like, pretend you bought here, and then you see a huge downturn in the market here, and literally our rents really didn't go up for over a decade. But the point is, they don't just go up and down because you just read an article or listened to this webinar. Perspective, it takes a while. So now we have very low vacancy rates, and then all of a sudden, 4 or 5 years ago, my God, the rents just started skyrocketing. 10.8%. I mean, this was 9.5, which was crazy stuff. 10.8%. So very similar to housing prices, rents have gone up at about the same pace, astronomically. And everybody said, it's got to change, it's got to change, it's got to change, it's got to change, it's got to get. Well, I don't know, it just kind of keeps going up. Why? You don't have to be that smart. Low vacancy.
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand every single time. And that's what we're seeing here. So if I knew that this vacancy was going to be here tomorrow, I would say, well, rents aren't really going to go up much anymore. Of course, we don't know, but I do believe, and I believe I have some evidence to suggest that we still are going to have low vacancy, especially in the lower to middle part of the market. I will take a huge exception. The luxury market's very different. It's been a year and a half
Define
at least.
Luxury.
Like for rich people. I don't know.
I mean, $3,000 a month in rent.
Yeah,
5,
something like that.
Okay.
Like once again, there's no definition. You kind of know it when you see it. Like downtown, 2-bedroom, 2-bath for $3,400 a month, like that kind of stuff. That actually has been overbuilt, and we have absolutely seen a softening in that market. For the rest of us, we're still seeing reasonably strong growth, and I have no reason to think it's going to slow down much. I honestly don't think it can be 10.8 forever. Truly, it'll become unaffordable. But for now, I'm certainly not worried about rent growth.
So we got a couple questions here, Charles. The first one is from Tony. He says, so I saw in the news that 120,000 people moved to Denver last year, but about 93,000 moved out of Colorado. If that's true, where were all the listings?
Where are all the listings?
I guess from the 93,000 moving out of Colorado.
Well, Tony, that's a great question. I actually am kind of stumped. I wasn't even sure what the question, right, all these people moved, didn't they sell their home? I love getting questions I've never heard before. I honestly don't know. You would think a lot of people obviously moved. I mean, obviously some were renters, some maybe kept their property, but I can tell you that maybe there would have been 0 listings, if these people actually hadn't moved.
But how's that compared to previous years? Is that normal? Or is that, well, because if it's normal, that might be.
I mean, first of all, define normal for me.
Well, I should say average.
Like I'm pointing at my computer. So this is the last 5 years. So was last year any different than 4 years ago? No, it wasn't.
Do you have the population growth?
Population growth, no, but it's about 1.2% per year. So all I can say is maybe there would have been just virtually no listings at all if people actually hadn't moved. And you bringing up another good point, population. So what's happening is our market, our Denver Front Range, we hit 3.1 million people in 3 million people in October of 2014. That was the first time we surpassed it. We're going up about 1 to 1.5% per year. And it's projected by Patty Silverstein, who's sort of the best known demographer in Colorado, that we should add 45,000 net to our population for the next 10 years, meaning it's going to go up about 500,000 people. There was an article a couple of weeks ago talking about all the people leaving. There are people leaving, but you just said it, Tony. You're exactly right. What was it? 120,000 moved in, 93 left. So that was 23,000 additional moves versus in versus out. And then we added almost 20,000 births over deaths, and that was the 40,000 person population increase. So kind of a long answer to a short question, but the fact is, I don't know. Apparently, if some people hadn't left, we would have had no inventory.
So here's a question from Billie Jean. She says, any thoughts on what will happen in Denver if affordability continues to decrease? Will people start leaving? Businesses start leaving? Will businesses start leaving? And even more people start renting?
Yeah, hey, Billie Jean, glad you joined us. Yes, I mean, I would assume that would be exactly the case. And by the way, let's make it clear, I do think we're going to have less affordability. Why? Because I think prices are going to continue to go up, and I don't think interest rates are going to go down. Now, I'm not going to predict interest rates, but really, they're kind of like at 48-year lows. They're like not at 50-year lows, but they're about as low, I think, as they can get. Don't listen to anybody who says to you interest rates are about to go up. That means they're trying to sell you a loan or sell you a property. Believe me, I won't be polite about that. We don't know where interest rates are going, but they're really not going down. What that means is I believe that we are absolutely going to have less affordability. Homes are going to be less affordable. So will people start to leave? Yeah, some people are already starting to leave. I mean, it's very expensive here. But, you know, is San Francisco a depopulated Mars? No. People want to live there. You ever been to San Francisco? That's why people want to live there. You ever been to Boston, San Diego, New York? I don't know how people figure it out, but people figure it out. People want to live where they want to live, and I won't name cities that people don't want to live because that would be insulting, but you can find them on a map. So yes, some people will start leaving, and some people will come even more. Will businesses start leaving? I don't quite know how to answer that question, except to say that it hasn't been happening. And literally yesterday, it was announced that Denver is now the top 20 cities for Amazon to potentially move. That's just another buzz. I would say, and I know you're an investor, Billie Jean, I would say I would not use this data to determine whether you should or shouldn't buy, say, a rental property or a fix and flip. I think it's great that you're on this, but if you're going to buy and hold forever and you'll be rich. If you want to do fix and flips, be really, really good at fix and flips and you'll make a lot of money. I appreciate the question. Thank you. Okay, let's move down a little bit. Do we have anything left? Yeah. Okay, so perfect time for this one. I'm going to credit Travis Spear from Pine Financial, you know, one of my best buddies and great guy in the business, client, colleague, all that kind of stuff. He actually suggested, hey, you know, wouldn't it be interesting to track home prices versus median rent? Like, wow. Yeah, that's a great idea. And we did it. And it came out with this beautiful slide. So this should look familiar. This is actually the same graph that we started with. These are single-family home prices over 40 whatever years. And this right here is what we added, the median rents. And what this tells us is what we thought we already knew. And it turns out it's true, is that people have to live somewhere. And Denver's a destination. People want to live in Denver. If you were actually standing in front of me, I would ask you to raise your hands and say, hey, how many of you are from Denver Metro? At least half of you aren't from Denver Metro every single time. And I'm not. I'm from Boston. I don't live in Boston. I live in Denver because I want to live in Denver. So what happens is people figure it out, and there is an absolute long-term correlation between home prices and median rent. Now, I would say, though, be careful. Just because, say, home prices go down tomorrow, it doesn't necessarily mean that median rent will go down tomorrow. It may take 6 months. It may take 2 years. Got to be very, very careful not misusing this data for your purposes. But we look long-term, and long-term, there is clearly a correlation between the two. And then I want to finish with this slide right here. And I know it's a little tough to see. A lot of you have seen this before, but this is our maps. We started producing these maps 10 years ago. And if you want a map, just email me and I can, you can come down to the office, I can give you a map. We update these quarterly. And what they do is we created these. No one had ever done this before. And what we did is we spent a lot of time pulling data, sold data from RE Colorado. and mapping it into identifiable neighborhoods. So let's look at Villa Park, and I know kind of squint on your screen, but this is Villa Park. This is what everybody knows is Villa Park. What this means, for example, is that in the last year, there was an average 24% price increase in Villa Park. The average priced home in the last year was $302,000, which, by the way, if you've been around for a while, you cannot believe that's what the average price is. We were buying there in the 90s a few years ago. There were 87 sold, but only 9 active. What does that say to you? It means there's nothing out there. There's nothing out there. 36% of the properties on RE Colorado at the time we did a snapshot were already under contract, and there's only 1.2 months of inventory, when 6 months of inventory is the average. That's considered 4 to 6 months, somewhere in there, a balanced market. So take a look at this. What you see are the dark green neighborhoods are the ones going up more, but there's actually been some price decreases statistically. Sloan West actually went down a little bit, and some others, but mostly you see some really, really strong price increases, which is what you'd expect. And like I said, if you want one of these maps, I can meet you at the office, give you a map, kind of walk through it with you. And I think that is the last slide. So I'll see, Chris, if there's any more questions, anything else. We always like to stay within our time period. We're at about 50 minutes right now. And just throw it out. If you have any more questions, let me know. And Chris, let me know if there's anything else that I should cover.
So the percent price change on here, is that year over year, the last quarter?
So the way we do it is, this would be the last 4 quarters, and this one right here would be all of 2017 divided by the 4 previous quarters, which would be all of 2016. So understand, it's backward looking, right? So what people say is, okay, this is pretty cool, but do I want to buy where prices are going down or up? And what I say is, do not misuse this data. That isn't what this is about. We're not selling this little toy that teaches you exactly where to buy and make lots of money. This is just one of the tools in your arsenal to understand what markets are doing. But it's backward looking because nobody knows the future. So in this case, this is all of 2017 sales in Villa Park divided by all of 2016.
Okay.
And if you do that, the prices went up 24%. And once again, if you look at larger trends, you see what's happening in our market.
So, I mean, what is the best way to read this map, or is there like a best intended way for someone to look at this map?
You know, it's
overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
It's intimidating.
It's important to understand the big trends. For example, if you come into the office, I'll pull out the 2009 map, and it'll be all red. Barnum went down like, 114%, where I had 29 properties, like not a lot of fun, okay? Those are the big trends. What I tell people is use this to understand, wow, 5 points has been going up for 5 years in a row. It's like tripled in price. Look at those big trends, but there is no substitute for actually understanding the market, working with professionals, getting a great loan officer, getting a great real estate agent, and understanding what you want. That's really how you make it in real estate, whether you're buying a home, selling a home, being an investor, anything you do. This is one piece of data, but it has to be part of a much larger arsenal.
Okay. Well, it looks like I think we got all the questions answered. Let's give it a quick check. Oh, someone raised their hand. I don't know what that means.
Okay, any last questions? We'll wait a couple seconds, but I think we're getting close here. And appreciate everybody being on and just kind of looking at all the people on, and I know lots of you, so thanks for being here.
Someone, Mary asked, are you able to send us these slides?
Yes, I think I can send you PDFs of these slides. I mean, we don't share everything with everybody. We share so much. Most of what the slides, certainly the PowerPoints, I keep to the Your Castle agent. So if you're a Your Castle agent, absolutely I can send you the PowerPoints. But send me an email and just kind of tell me a little bit about who you are, and I can send you a PDF of the slides. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for coming out. We really appreciate it. Oh. All right, spoke too soon.
Sorry, one more question.
Carl says, do you have this map for a larger area of the metro area?
Yes, indeed we do. We have it kind of north, south, west, and east. So once again, email me. I'll see what I can do for you.
Great. All right, everyone, thank you for coming out. Again, remember, I put the link in for our January Roundup webinar happening February 1st. Really interesting stuff, so register for it to see it live or get the recording emailed out. And Charles, thank you for spending an hour with us.
Thank you. Lots of fun. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Have a great day.